This week on Political Capital, can there be an end-of-session tax cut compromise? Wither the deficit? We asked Congressman Fred Upton, Republican Supercommittee member and chairman of the House Energy and Commerce Committee.
We have to look at where there is common ground.
And on the last word, the Republican race heats up. We begin the show with Congressman Fred Upton, Republican chairman of the House Energy and Commerce Committee. Thank you for being with us, Mr. Chairman.
It's Fred, Al. How are you?
Fred, thank you. It's good to be here. Congress is rushing to adjourn before Christmas. Will you resolve the payroll tax holiday and unemployment benefits controversy in order that before you get out?
I think we will. My sense is, and it's still a working project as we talk now, the keys, particularly from the Republican side, are that these have to be paid for.
Right.
We're not going to increase the size of the deficit.
Will you compromise on that with some of the Democratic demands?
Well,
is there
sure.
middle ground?
Well, you know, the Senate this last week, they had two competing proposals.
Right.
Neither one of them passed.
Right.
So I think you have to
so
look
you
at
still think
what
some
emerges
sort of
from the
compromise
House
is likely?
Yeah, but the bottom line is that they're going to be paid for. It's not going to be just off we go and we're going to increase the size of the deficit or hurt the trust fund.
Well, this is a political question, but the Democrats appear to have won the fight politically. The most prominent conservative blogger, Eric Erickson, says he's astounded, quote, Democrats are outmaneuvering Republicans on a tax cut, and that poll after poll show that Republicans are siding with the rich. Now, aren't you politically losing this battle?
No, I mean, from our perspective, they have to be paid for.
Right.
This is a tax cut that expires, that hurts working Americans, you know, a pretty sizable amount, $1,000, $2,000, depending on how much people earn. And the impact is in January, and our leadership is committed to extending the tax cut, not raising taxes, therefore, but finding the offset.
But you don't think the other side's won the political battle?
Well, the Senate bill, remember, there's been no bill yet in the House, but at the end of the day, that is the proposal that will emerge in the House that the Senate then will have to consider, something that they've not done yet.
The overall question of the deficit. You were a member of the supercommittee. It didn't succeed. That means, you know, over $1 trillion of cuts automatic cuts are supposed to take place in a little over a year. Will they, or will they be diluted?
No, by the supercommittee not reaching an agreement,
right,
we have the automatic sequester that comes in, $1.2 trillion in cuts. Right. Those will stick. Now, we're going to be looking at the defense and the non-defense side of the ledger, because remember, it's equal on both sides. And there'll be a debate over the next 12 or 13 months looking for changes. I mean, no one really wants these automatic cuts to come into place.
So the cuts will take place, but it may be a different
there'll be an
mix.
opportunity for us to change those with elements of a variety of different things.
Tell me this: if you're unable to agree, you certainly made a major effort.
But remember, the bottom line was the $1.2 trillion in debt reduction really does occur, one way or the other, either with the automatic across the board cut, or had the supercommittee found an alternative that it would have equaled the $1.2 trillion as well.
If Simpson-Bowles, which was a compromise between competing claims, got support from Republicans and Democrats, if that were put up for a floor vote right now, would you vote for it?
I don't know, because it's not been scored, I don't believe, by the CBO. There were some numbers there that were a little bit fudged, as I understand it. It was, for me, I want the debt to go down. The Simpson-Bowles was a larger plan than the minimum that was sought by our committee. We actually met with a number of the Simpson-Bowles members. It can be part of a base. I mean, at the end, you know, as I look at solving this debt situation, and we have to do it. It didn't come up overnight. It happened over a long period of time. We have to look at where there is common ground. That's what Simpson-Bowles tried to do. Frankly, that's what the supercommittee tried to do as well. And I'm you know, we came close. We came close. But it's not all for naught, because even looking at this debate that we're having now on the payroll tax extension, we're looking at a number of different proposals that, in fact, the supercommittee worked on. And really, I think you'll see some agreements down the road. Corporate tax reform. I'll tell you, Dave Camp, the chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, Max Baucus, most of us on the supercommittee realize that we want corporate tax reform. We want to lower the rates. We want to flatten them. We want to eliminate a number of the different loopholes or deductions.
But you don't want net tax increases, and you resisted tax increases on the wealthy because you say, and I think this is fair, these are the job creators, and so don't destroy jobs. Let me read you, there's a guy named Nick Hanauer, who's a billionaire, entrepreneur, internet investor. He wrote a column for Bloomberg the other day. He said, rich people don't create jobs. Middle-class consumers are far more job creators than I'll ever be, and since 1980, fat cats like me have made out like wild. We ought to help the middle class.
Well, remember, half of the small businesses, and small businesses create more jobs than anybody else, half of the small businesses file as individuals. So what the Toomey proposal did, and Toomey was a member of our super committee, he looked at locking in the current tax rates or lowering them, but eliminating a number of the different loopholes or deductions, and in fact generating more revenue. One of the things that I believe that, as you look at the whole equation, I wasn't opposed to raising more revenue by having more people work. That was the key. Getting people back to work, paying the taxes, and helping to lower the deficit.
Why under those pre-Bush tax cut tax rates did the economy do so well in the 90s, and why under the Bush tax rates, less for the wealthy, to do so poorly in this decade?
A couple things. One, spending went up. The wars, I mean, that's trillions of dollars. And also there was no change in the entitlements. And we also know...
But that shouldn't hurt the economy. That shouldn't hurt economic growth.
Yeah, but that impacts the debt.
But I'm asking, why did the economy grow a lot? Why were more jobs created in the previous decade under higher taxes than in this decade under lower taxes?
I don't know specifically the answer to that question. I can maybe merit a guess, but I mean, in large part, it's because we lost jobs. I mean, look at the jobs report that came out this last week. 300-some thousand people actually stopped looking for jobs.
Your state of Michigan went through the roughest of times.
We are still in the roughest of times.
But you're coming back. The autos are really doing better. Was Barack Obama right or not in the auto rescue plan of 2009?
The auto rescue plan was led by a bipartisan member. Every member of the Michigan delegation, Republican or Democrat, helped with the autos.
So it was the right thing to do?
It was the right thing to do because, and looking back now in hindsight, not only was the money paid back, a lot of the interest was paid too. They wouldn't have survived.
Your two major presidential contenders, Mitt Romney and Newt Gingrich, say it was really a bad thing to do. It shouldn't have been done. Will that make it hard for them in Michigan next year?
We'll see. I mean, at the end of the day, by the auto companies surviving, and remember that even the companies that did not receive the auto money, Ford, as an example, they argued in support of the effort for Chrysler and General Motors because they use the same suppliers. They couldn't build the cars that they build today had the parts suppliers that provide parts for all of them, and Toyota and Honda as well. They wouldn't have survived.
It's not going to be a plus for a Romney or a Gingrich next year.
They are both in Michigan because of our overall economic climate. Any Republican candidate is looking actually pretty good in Michigan, and Michigan hasn't gone for Republican since 1988.
Fred, thank you so much for being with us.
Always good to be with you.
Welcome back. With a month to go before the Iowa caucuses, we take stock of the Republican presidential field and the take from the Obama White House. Joining me are Bloomberg News White House correspondent Hans Nichols and political correspondent Julie Davis. Julie, two realities about the Republican race right now. The frontrunners clearly are Romney and Gingrich, and it really is heating up. Let's take a look at a web video attack that John Huntsman is mounting against Mitt Romney.
I'd say on camera and other places that at times you thought it would be a model for the nation.
You're wrong, Brett.
At times you thought it would be a model for the nation.
Is the Massachusetts approach that was passed under Governor Romney, is that a good model for the nation?
Well, I think so. But those who follow the path that we pursued will find it's the best path, and we'll end up with a nation that's taken a mandate approach.
Pretty tough ad. Julie, how is Governor Romney going to handle a barrage of attacks coming not just from Huntsman, but from others, including the Democrats?
Well, there's no question that he's got to be undergoing what Herman Cain might call a reassessment. This is really a pivot point for him because most of the year he's been bumping along in this campaign. He's been running a very cautious campaign predicated on the notion that the conservative base of the Republican Party, while it doesn't love him, doesn't love any one other person
So
enough
it's a general election
to be a
strategy.
problem. Yeah, and he's really pursued that. He's focused his fire on President Obama. He hasn't stooped to really attack any of his opponents. And if he's going to be weathering this kind of attack day in and day out, he's really going to have to change that. And we're already seeing that start to happen. He's starting to hit Newt Gingrich in interviews and in public comments for being a career politician. But he's really going to have to step it up, and that has risks for him as well.
Right. No longer the luxury, though, of being a general election candidate.
Absolutely
right now.
not. He's got to worry about his right flank.
Well, you mentioned Newt Gingrich, and Romney may be attacking him, but I'll tell you somebody who's attacking him even more is Ron Paul, who we forget is a real factor still in Iowa. Let's take a look at the Ron Paul web video on Newt Gingrich.
Let's look at the politicians who created the environment, the politicians who profited from the environment, politicians who profited from the environment.
Newt Gingrich on the defense for taking $1.5 million.
After he left Congress, Freddie Mac paid Gingrich at least $1.6 million.
$1.6 million, some of it just before the housing market collapsed.
How is Gingrich going to handle these kind of attacks while he's in the midst of this surge?
Well, what he says he's going to do is stay positive, and he's not going to attack his opponents.
Newt Gingrich positive?
Newt Gingrich positive.
Okay.
You and I both remember, anyone who watched Gingrich's rise and his time in Congress, it's quite clear that one of his biggest liabilities can be himself. And I think Ron Paul and others in the race are going to try to exploit that. They're obviously trying to exploit what he did after he left Congress. He made a lot of money working for a lot of different companies, talking about issues that are big issues in the campaign. So that's going to be a potential liability for him. But he has said he's going to stay positive because he feels like he's on the upswing, and as long as he is on that trajectory, he doesn't want to stoop to, he's sort of in a warm and fuzzy place, he feels, right now with voters.
One of the things he did, he sat in a love seat with Nancy Pelosi to embrace climate change, and we all wonder, how he ended up there. You broke a story on Friday that told us how he did get there.
Well, the former Vice President Al Gore, the winner of the 2007...
Al Gore got Newt Gingrich?
He absolutely called him on the phone, and we all think of Newt Gingrich as a Republican firebrand, but he can be very warm and fuzzy, and the two had a very friendly exchange about him participating in this ad. It was something he wanted to do against the advice of his political advisors, and Gore talked him into it.
Boy, Al Gore and Newt Gingrich and sitting on a love seat with Nancy Pelosi. Doesn't get much better than that.
He says it was the dumbest thing he's done.
Hans, what's the take from the White House on the Newt boomlet?
Well, anything that softens up Romney is something they welcome, right? I mean, you look at the campaign 4 years ago, and you can argue that the long cycle helped Obama. Hard to make that case in this cycle. I was out there in Chicago talking to a lot of folks, really before Newt took off, but still the theory holds. One thing they value is organization. They look out across and they say, Romney's building a pretty strong organization, a national organization. Newt doesn't have one. They don't think he'll probably end up being the nominee.
They think they'll run against Romney.
That's the view, the vibe,
okay.
But they'll meld their charges against them, both being soft on Wall Street reform, privatizing Medicaid. A lot of times they can go back and forth.
Is there concern about the Wall Street bullishness on the Republicans, especially Romney?
Well, look, Steve Schwartzman, big Republican, came out for Romney. He's hosting a fundraiser for him in December. The White House isn't going to have a hard time raising money. They're not going to be short on cash. And what they'll do is they'll say, look, Romney's not just raising money on Wall Street, he's campaigning on Wall Street, and he's campaigning against Wall Street reform. White House and Chicago thinks that's an untenable position.
Steve Schwartzman may not have helped him when asked why he was for Romney. He said, because I made a lot of money with him on a deal. I'm not quite sure that's going to play well with the 99%, but we'll see. How about the payroll tax and unemployment comp fight up there? Does the White House think they have a winning hand and that they will win?
Yes and yes. They don't want to be seen at the end of this as compromisers. That's why they feel so burned by the debt deal, even last year when they had the big negotiation on the payroll tax cuts. So they're not really in a compromising mood. Will there be a pay for? Will there won't be? I don't know. I mean, Julie might be better positioned on that with congressional reporting. What the White House wants to do is get the bigger unemployment insurance extension. Because when you look at the multiplier effect in terms of what it can actually do for the economy, the big number on UI extension, making it for 99 weeks, the long term versus the short term, is probably what the White House is really going to get. Pretty confident right now they are that they're going to get the 2% extension, not the expansion.
Obama's orientation may be the Pacific, but these days he's looking across that Atlantic pond a lot, and there must be a lot of concern about Europe.
There's huge concern. There's taking up a lot of the president's time, a lot of the Treasury Secretary's time. There's a view inside that the White House can't want the euro to survive more than the Europeans want it to survive. At the same time, look, the campaign clearly wants Europe to stay afloat, because if not, it's really hard to see if Europe goes into a deep recession. It's probably going to go into a recession, but if it goes into a deep recession, there's not spillover to the growth rate here, and that's bad for the president's re-election prospect.
And what's the take on Iran?
Perhaps a little more optimism, if you can use that. In terms of the takeover of the embassy, of the British embassy, might show division of power within the ruling power, could give a window for the opposition, could mean that reform is on the march there. But really complicated situation, and they don't want any more unknowns at this point. They want to know what it's going to be like for 2012, move forward.
Okay, Hans and Julie, thank you. The voting begins in just about a month. Welcome back. We'll go to Kate and Margaret in a moment. But first, jobs numbers came out Friday showing the unemployment rate dropped to 8.6%. Reason to cheer? We'll ask Bloomberg News chief economics correspondent Rich Miller. Rich, the number went down to 8.6, but the number of jobs created was okay, but nothing to really cheer about.
Right. I mean, I would say this is more glass half full and half empty story. The jobs gains on the payroll side were 120,000, about in line with what people expected. But the good news was they went back and revised the previous 2 months up by 72,000. The big surprise was that drop in the unemployment rate to 8.6%. About half of that was due to people getting jobs, and about half was due to people dropping out of the labor force. On the whole, though, I'd say more good news than bad in the report.
Well, in the at least semi-good news category, I suppose, is after months of reporting that the consumers were really dispirited, it seems the consumers are in more of a spending mood.
Yeah, no, it is. Some people are calling it frugal fatigue. I mean, people are just, tired of hunkering down, putting off purchases of cars, putting off purchases of electronic products. And as a result, they're letting their savings run down a little bit. They're also helped by the fact that inflation seems to be coming off. Gasoline prices are down about 50 cents a gallon since June, and the retailers seem to be falling over each other to try to offer deals post-Thanksgiving. So the big key will be if the jobs gains keep going, then the consumers can keep on spending.
Rich, I know static analysis is flawed, but from what we know right now, what's the unemployment rate likely to look like in November of 2012?
You really put me on the spot, huh? Let's see. 8.32517%. No.
Okay, we've heard it here.
The administration in their forecast for the mid-session budget review said the unemployment rate could get down to 8.2% by the fourth quarter of the year. I mean, before today's numbers, I would have said that's a stretch, but that probably might be achievable by the fourth quarter of next year.
Rich, a quick final question. The coordinated action by 6 central banks led by the Fed to help Europe, is it going to work, and is the outlook less bleak for Europe than we once thought?
I mean, I try to think of it. This is like when you have you're really sick. I mean, and you have a high fever. You take an aspirin and you get the fever down, but you don't, really tackle the underlying problems of what's wrong with you until you get the something more powerful. I mean, the Fed action attack the fever is helping the banks, but you still have this big problem of sovereign debt, and the Fed action really doesn't address that and can't address that.
Okay, Rich Miller, thank you. Let me turn to Kate and Margaret. Now, Margaret, the Herman Cain campaign, such as it was, now seems to have officially imploded, whether it's officially over or not. What do we make of it?
Well, he took us all for a ride, including the media. The debates allowed this campaign more than ever to be a reality show, or actually a tryout for a reality show and a Fox News gig. Cain is a natural salesman, or the negative huckster. I'm not sure he thought he would ever get to the point where his book tour would mean he was asked about Libya. Early on, he said, I don't need to know about Uzbekistan. He meant it.
Kate?
Yeah, I think Margaret's right. The media's been irrelevant. The unprecedented number of debates permitted millions of people to look at the field unfiltered by the media, and even had the media been far more skeptical of Herman Cain's candidacy, given the dynamic in the Republican base, that probably would have been worth 10 points to him in the polls.
Well, the irony is he's been forced out or he's being dragged down, whatever have you, by his personal problems. But his substantive problems were even greater when you looked at it.
It obscures those.
Yeah, it does.
Yes.
All right, let me talk about Newt Gingrich for a second, Kate. I know one of our favorite topics here. He says he was not a lobbyist. He got money from Freddie Mac and others. He got 60 grand, speech. But that's different than lobbying.
You lack historical perspective, Al.
Well,
Winston Churchill didn't have to lobby.
No, you're right,
No,
he didn't.
right.
But I don't think he got 60 grand a pop, did he?
What's so unwelcome about Newt Gingrich reminding us of how lucrative being a political celebrity is, in the day, Pat Buchanan, for instance, his years on television made him a political celebrity, and that gave him enough support to be able to attract voters, and run for office. Now, people who lack that kind of name ID want to run for president in order to become the kind of political celebrity who can command $60,000 a speech.
Remarkable.
The stage is only going to get more and more crowded during debates.
Maggie?
Yeah, those those who paid him $75,000 a piece feel really bad. This is a variation. He's too big to lobby, so he blurts out something that is so offensive to most people in this country that you can get paid $60,000 for 45 minutes. It's offensive. Lucky for Gingrich, he comes out with something else outrageous, so it erases that. He says that no one poor has any work habits, and so that's what we're concerned about right now.
And of course, he's a Washington outsider while he was getting that 60 grand from Washington insiders. Anyway, you guys are always insiders and outsiders. Thank you. And thank all of you for joining us, and we'll see you again next week.
Political Capital is a production of Bloomberg Television.